Good morning, everyone. Well, it's morning for me. I don't know where you guys are at. I'm on the West Coast. It's morning time right now. 9:30 a.m. for me. I don't know. You tell me. You tell me where they at. Everywhere, if you ask me. What's the weather like over there, Splash? So we're going to talk about a sensitive topic today. Who is that? Oh, hot as fuck. Okay. Dave Tao, where you at? So as I was saying, we're going to be talking about a sensitive subject today. You're going to take it slow. There may be a guest speaker, a industry expert, if you may. Um, if he's unable to make it, the show will go on. As I said, we're going to take it slow. We're going to start off with some actual uh, background, create a context. Then we'll go into some statistics, and we'll go from there. So basically, today we're going to talk about this is actually more of I don't want to say continuation, but more of a more in-depth evaluation of the live stream that I presented yesterday. Yesterday morning on my way home from work, I actually did a live stream. It was very impromptu. Faulkner, I sent you the email with the link. Did you get it? I don't know if you got the email. I sent it to your Yahoo. Check your Yahoo email. I sent it to you. So as I was saying yesterday, there was an impromptu stream that I hosted. It was from my cell phone, so I was unable to get live stream panel members via Google Hangouts. Once you actually initiate a live stream on your phone, um, it's a little bit tricky. I don't know if it's even possible to transition to a PC and actually host panel members. So this is the reason why I didn't do that yesterday. Charles Faulkner, did you get the actual email that I sent with the actual Hangout link? I sent you the Google Hangout link via Google Hangouts. I'm not sure if you got it, or are you having issues actually clicking on the link? Sometimes that's an issue with the encoding. Here.
Yeah. And of all you other people. Woo!
Woo!
Oh man, I'm just finished washing dishes, man. God damn, you don't realize how many dishes you got to everything.
Man, you got to get that dishwasher on deck, man.
That's gonna be the next vibe of the taxes, man.
Yeah. I don't
You
know
know,
how. I don't know how I can.
I have a dishwasher.
Oh,
And he's 11 years old. So let me
oh, there
stop.
you go. There you go.
Oh man, how you doing, man?
I'm great. Glad to have you on the panel today. I'm going to do a quick monologue. I want to give some context to this actual live stream topic, and I also have a couple of statistics here, and then we'll get into your interpretation, Sir Charles.
Of course.
So we're going to talk about an event that transpired on the night of November 22nd. For those of you that don't know, that was Thanksgiving evening. And a subject, or actually a press release came across the airwaves. And it was by the police department. And first they said a 21-year-old suspect shot and wounded two other people. Then they said the suspect, Emantic Bradford, didn't pull the trigger, but brandished the gun. And now we've learned that Bradford didn't necessarily do either.
Mm,
Hmm.
the plot
So
thickens.
the Hoover police reported a shooting Thursday night, November 22nd, as I previously stated, at River Chase Galleria Mall, which is an upscale mall south of Birmingham, Alabama, for those that don't know. Um, Police said that two men got into a fight at the mall, and one of the men shot the other twice in the upper body. Two uniformed police officers working security at the mall were nearby at the time of the shooting. Police said while moving toward the shooting scene, one of the officers encountered a suspect brandishing a pistol and shot him.
Mm.
They identified the slain suspect as a 21-year-old Army veteran from nearby Hueytown. The other man who was shot at the mall and a 12-year-old girl struck by a stray bullet both survived. So Hoover police identified the man killed as Emantic Bradford Jr. They said Bradford fled the shooting scene while brandishing a handgun, and an officer shot him. Sometime after that initial release, the Hoover police issued another clarification, saying Bradford simply had a gun in his hand. Now, earlier, they stated that Mr. Bradford, quote unquote, brandished a gun. And let's clarify the word brandish, because Mr. Bradford had a gun in his hand as police officers responded to the active shooter situation between mall patrons. So they say. Now, but brandish, according to most definitions, means to wave or show a weapon in an aggressive or menacing manner. Bradford was actually trying to help people to safety when he was shot, says police attorney Ben Crump. Crump also said Bradford had a permit to carry a concealed weapon. Okay, so now we're going to dig a little bit deeper, and we're going to go back to a previous incident that occurred that some of you may or may not be familiar with. And this pertains to a Jamel Roberson. In the early hours of November 11th, not very long ago, 26-year-old Jamel Roberson was working security at a bar in the Chicago suburbs when the shooting broke out. Shortly after Roberson subdued the suspect at gunpoint, police arrived and fatally shot the armed security guard Jamel Roberson as he pinned the suspect to the ground. Now, when officers arrived from Robbins and Midlothian police departments, one officer opened fire, killing Roberson. According to witness statements given to local outlets, the officer fired even as witness told them to stop. Everyone was screaming out, "Security." It was a security guard. So says witness Adam Harris. They still did their job and saw a black man with a gun. and basically killed him. Adam Harris added. Now, in preliminary findings in that particular case, Illinois State Police, which is tasked with investigating the shooting, argued that the officer gave Roberson multiple verbal commands to drop his weapon before opening fire. According to witness statements, the Midlothian officer gave the armed suspect multiple verbal commands to drop the gun and get on the ground before ultimately discharging his weapon and striking the suspect, State Police said in a statement. The agency added that Roberson was not wearing anything that identified him as a security guard. Now, Gregory Coulis, a lawyer representing Roberson's mother in a civil rights lawsuit filed after the shooting, said that Roberson had a hat with the words security plainly written on it. Now, let's go over some statistics, because maybe these are just two isolated incidents. Maybe this doesn't happen all the time. But according to stats for 2018, and these statistics, let me get the correct quote. These statistics were compiled by, let's see here, this is going to be Washington Post. And Washington Post has like an ongoing database of some of these police shooting statistics. Now, according to their statistics, 876 people were shot and killed by the police in 2018. 876. Now, so that represents a very, very small number when we look at the actual population of the U.S. Let's just bear that in mind. But these are people that were shot and killed. So it doesn't include people who were shot but survived the shooting. Out of those 876 people, 830 of them were males. Okay. And so for that total 876 people, 371 were white, 193 were black, and 124 were Hispanic. Okay, let's remember those numbers: 371 white, 193 black, and 124 Hispanic. Okay. Age demographics: less than 18 years of age, 12 people. Between the ages of 18 and 29, 252. Between the ages of 30 and 44, 329. 45 years of age or greater, 213. And then there were 70 whose age was not known. Out of those people, 165 were known to have mental illness. Okay? So when we talk about people who were shot by the police, 482 of them had a firearm. 148 of them had a knife or bladed weapon. 28 of them were perceived to be armed with a vehicle. 29 had a toy weapon. 100 were other unspecified weapons. 38 of them were unarmed, and 50 were unknown, whether they were armed or not. Out of those, let's go back to that number. 876 people killed by the police. Police officers were wearing a body cam for 92 of those incidents. Only 92. 784 did not have 784 times there was no body cam present or not even turned on. Now, when we look at the actual circumstances around the shooting, 143 were fleeing the scene via car, 121 fleeing the scene via foot, 24 other, 530 were not fleeing at all, 58 were undetermined. Now, when we look at these numbers, you'll often find statistics, citing a per capita number, which per capita is basically a ratio. And oftentimes use per capita when the number is less than 1%. So oftentimes you'll find a ratio per 1,000 people. Now, if the numbers are great enough to be per 100 people, then you can actually append a percentage to that number. But sometimes that per capita is a lot more useful to giving a clear picture of how frequently an incident may occur. Now, when we look at the actual population of the U.S. in 2017, we have 325,719,178. And this is the latest by the census. Of the people that were white and not of Hispanic origin, 60.7% of the U.S. population. Black, 13.4% of the U.S. population, and Hispanic, 18.4%. Now, I'm sticking to those three demographics because they represent the greatest majority. And I'm not saying that the other demographics are statistically insignificant, but I want to make this simple. So we're going to stick to the greatest population, which is going to be Black, white, and Hispanic. Now, of the people shot by the police and killed, 42.3% of them were white. Again, 42.3% of that 876 people shot and killed by the police in 2018 were white. 22% were Black, 14% are Hispanic. So what does that mean? What does that mean? When we look at the actual numbers of the population, that should correlate with the shooting victims. When the numbers don't correlate, i.e., the population percentage versus the shooting percentage has a disparity, that means that the individual who represents a smaller portion of the population yet are victimized to a greater degree obviously have a higher propensity to be shot by the police. Case in point, Blacks represent 13.4% of the population, yet 22% of the shootings have Black victims. And these are just the shootings that resulted in death. It doesn't take into consideration the shootings that the individual may be still alive. So the reason why I bring that up is because it seems to be rather frequent that someone of African American descent is a victim of a police shooting. And oftentimes, the circumstances surrounding the shooting makes the people, the general populace, citizens of the U.S., wonder if the shooting was actually justified. This is the reason why I'm doing the live stream now, and I have a guest speaker today, Charles Faulkner Jr. Now, Charles Faulkner, would you like to give a little background about who you are and what you do, and how you can shed light on this situation?
How you doing, everybody? My name's Charles Faulkner Jr. I'm a veteran of the Baltimore Police Department of these last 12 years, a veteran of the U.S. Army for 10, spent 18 months in Iraq, part of the Quick Reaction Force. So I've been knowing my way around a firearm or two. So I think we got to look at not just the statistics, but also demographics. And we got to look at the culture. If you don't mind me doing a short little monologue.
By all means, go ahead.
If you look at Black culture, and of course, historically speaking, the police has never really been our strong point or friends, because historically, those were reparations given to the Irish, another downtrodden people, until they received their honorary white cards, until they were actually factually called white. And for the longest times, the Irish and the Italians were not considered white until the actual Anglo-Saxons needed stronger numbers. So, like I said, historically, the Irish, that's why you have the Emerald police organizations, and the Italians were given the fire departments. So what happens? You have a lot of people who were downtrodden for years by the same people, the higher ups. Now, what happens? You get the same groups of people that you were shitting on, and now they get to do it to us. Let's fast forward about 100 years. Matter of fact, yeah, about 100 years. Even in Baltimore, which is almost 16, 68, almost 70% black, you only have a police department that's what, 45% black? Historically, we always had a bad taste in our mouth because of the police. And I understand it. We have a very bad habit as a people relying on our protection from others instead of taking the initiative to protect ourselves. Who's better to police you than your own? We don't homegrown our own police, our own teachers, our own firefighters. But we're homegrown athletes, though. But we don't have an issue with athletics. We have an issue with cultural differences in law enforcement. So when you have a lot of these shootings, especially when it's a white officer and a black male, there's always going to be some type of backlash, whether the officer is justified or not. It's always going to leave a bad taste in people's mouths because of the historical issues we had. When you look at the statistics and numbers, of course you're going to have raw numbers, more white people shot because there's more white people in this country. But when you have a higher percentage of black people shot than we have a percentage of being the population of the country, you have to ask yourself, why? Is it because black people are more violent? Is it because black people are more heavily policed? You have to ask the really important questions, even if they piss you off. And I think one of the one of the things we do as a people is that we get so emotional, probably because we adhere so much to the feminine principle that we forget to be logical and take your emotions out the equation and make an observation of what's going on around you. And not only see the issue for what it is, but also what are we going to have as a solution? I'm done for right now.
Okay, thank you so much, Charles. Excellent points that you made there. Um, from your assessment of the situation that we're talking about in particular, and when I say situation, I'm primarily referring to the situation involving Emantic Fitzgerald Bradford Jr., the individual that was shot uh, at a mall in south of Birmingham, Alabama. Um, from your assessment as a member of law enforcement, is there enough information to draw any sort of conclusion about this particular case?
They can have cases 20 years later. You probably don't have all the information.
Mm.
And what happens is that a police officer will go into a situation and having to make a split second decision. And you can be judged for that decision for 2, 5, or 10 years. And you got to realize, even though America's born on the gun, we have almost a historical ignorance of being, and placed in a position where we had to be held accountable for our own safety or the safety of others. We're kind of spoiled as a country compared to countries like Israel or Russia, where you have mandatory 2-year service in the military, where one half of 1% protects the country. So a lot of people are ignorant when it comes to having to be put in a situation and you have to make a split second decision to shoot or don't shoot. Excuse me.
So let me ask you, in a situation such as what the police claims to has happened, they claim that they responded to a shooting and they were looking for a suspect in said shooting. They came across an individual who they claim was holding a firearm. Now, they subsequently modified their positioning and said the suspect was merely holding a firearm and not brandishing it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in a situation like that, when you're looking for potentially an active shooter and you come across an individual matching the description of the suspect, holding a firearm but not brandishing it, what would you do in that situation? Is your instinct to shoot immediately?
Well, it depends on the situation. Is the gun being pointed at someone? Is the gun because sometimes you see here's because of movies, and that's another thing I'm glad you brought up. Because of movies and television, people think you're supposed to give a warning. You don't have to give a warning. If number one, it gives you enough time to turn the gun on me, and number two, if you're pointing it at someone else, I'm going to take the shot. If the gun is down at the ready, yes, my gun is going to be pointed at you. Maybe depending on the time or depending on the situation, we maybe could talk him down. Maybe we can't. There's no 100% thing. It's a fluid situation, meaning that it's ever changing. One minute he could be okay. I'm a surrender officer. Next thing you know, he's putting rounds down at you. Now, here's the part that we don't understand. That's why I said there's ever flowing. Was he pointing it towards the ground? Was he pointing it at himself? Was he holding it in his dip? Was he about to pull it? Because there's so many variations of situations how you could word it. And then you get into a game of semantics. So it depends on the situation. Like, can I talk him down? Yeah, my gun will be out just in case, pointed at you to take the tactical advantage. Now, if you're holding it and it's pointing towards and you're coming up and you're raising it up, yes, I'm going to shoot you. Is there a time where I could talk to you until you drop it? It depends. And every situation is going to dictate differently.
Okay, sounds fair enough. Let's rewind a little bit and let's look at the perspective of the law enforcement officers involved in the shooting of Jamil Roberson. Now, this situation was a little bit different. Police responded to a call of some disturbance at a nightclub. Police arrived. They see a man with the security hat on. Now, maybe they didn't see the security hat. Maybe they just saw the hat but didn't know what it said on it. That's entirely plausible. They come across the scene, crowd gathered, and there's a man subduing another man on the ground, firearm drawn, pointed at the individual on the ground. This person has his knee on the back of the other person, kind of in a knelt position. And again, has the firearm trained at the individual that's on the ground. Subdued.
Mm-hmm.
And you come across the scene as a police officer. What are your first steps?
You're going to automatically see the gun.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people, once again, when I talk about the ignorance of being in that situation, you get tunnel vision. It's the fight or flight response. Everybody has it in their body. When we're talking about the physical nature of the human body when it's under stress, you're going to get tunnel vision. The hearing, just like the same thing happened to the security guard. I will bet money it happened. It was at the security guard. Unfortunately, he probably was so focused on the individual who was the threat that even if the officers yelled to him, "Drop the gun," he might not have heard it because he was focused on the threat with the guy on the ground. Two, like you said about the security, because we had a very, very similar incident that happened in Baltimore with one of our officers who unfortunately lost his life, where he was working at a nightclub, fight broke out, and he was on the ground trying to, so he was on the ground and he was overpowered, so he had to take his gun and he had to shoot the suspects off of him. Officers came to the scene and seen, a guy with a gun, and unfortunately drew their service weapons and fired upon the officer, killing him.
Mm.
Is it a case of black man with a gun? No, you just see the gun. Come to find out, during the investigation, he had his badge on a chain and his on his chest.
Mm-hmm.
That's why when I work secondary off duty work, I will wear a big ass shirt that says police in big bold letters. You can't miss it. You can't miss it.
Mm.
And I'm not making excuses for anybody, but that happens. That tunnel vision happens. If anybody's ever been in a fight, tunnel vision, you don't see anything around you. You're concentrated on a threat. Your muscles are tense. Your vision is shortened. Your hearing is going. All your body parts are all the blood is going to your extremities, and you're focused on either fleeing the threat or taking out the threat. So a lot of times people are ignorant of that fact and that notion that the officers most likely were yelling to him, "Drop the gun." He probably couldn't hear it because we don't know what the suspect he had pinned down had. He might have had a gun on him. He might have had a knife on him. I'm pretty sure there probably was a weapon on the guy on the ground because he probably wouldn't have drew his weapon. So you're going to a situation where the cops just see a guy, and depending on the distance, they might not have, like you said, they might not have seen what the hat said. That's why you always got to wear the shirt that differentiates. Okay, police. Even when I'm off duty going to the mall, I got to be cognizant. If I pull my service weapon out and shoot, I still got to listen to that officer on scene. And hey, I got to go pan out on the ground, drop the gun, and be like, hey, this is the bad guy. I'm going down to the ground slowly, putting my gun down slowly. Hey, this is the bad guy. Keep your eyes on him. Even if I shoot him or if I got him pinned to the ground, you know, I don't want to be shot myself. So there's many different ways you have to be cognizant of the situation.
Yeah, so that definitely complicates the situation. Um, Now, what I'm going to do rather quickly, I'm about to do some mathematics because something just came to mind, and I'm going to pose something to everyone, and yeah, this is going to be kind of thought provoking. At least I think it is. And let's see here. Now we can divide that by 325. 9. Okay, so when we look at the number of law enforcement officers in the U.S., and we're going to use a number from 2017.
Mm-hmm.
There were in 2017 422,869 full-time law enforcement officers in the United States. Now, let's keep in mind law enforcement can mean U.S. Marshal, can mean DEA, FBI. So that's not necessarily only
Metro-
pertaining to law.
Metropolitan Police.
There we go, metropolitan and sheriff. Will sheriff be considered metropolitan police?
They could be in certain jurisdictions.
Yeah, you have the sheriff, you have the highway patrol constable. These are the law enforcement person that most people have interaction with. Most people, unless you're, if you have interaction with the DEA or FBI, well, you're in big trouble.
You
So
probably should be doing something you shouldn't.
exactly. So when we talk about that number of law enforcement, I'd imagine that if we just include local municipalities and state police, it will be significantly, well, I wouldn't say significantly, but that number would be somewhat less than 422,869.
Yeah, it's
But
about 100,000. About 100,000 agencies.
yeah, so yeah, we're talking border patrol. There's a lot of agencies that we really start thinking about it.
You could even add Coast Guard.
There you go. There you
Yeah,
go.
because they fall under DOD and Department of Homeland Security. They can make arrests and carry like any municipality or federal police agency.
Now, when we look at that number of law enforcement, that looks like a big number. But when we compare it to the population of the United States, which is 325,719, excuse me, 325,719,178 people, that was in 2017. Now, remember, that population does include law enforcement personnel too. So, but when we look at those numbers, what we realize is that there's not enough police for every person.
Mm, exactly. We say that a lot.
The police are, I mean, they're outnumbered, no doubt about it. Law enforcement in the United States is outnumbered, and this is going to be in any country. So suffice it to say that there may be a situation that you as a civilian may find yourself involved in, and there's no one to save you. The police response time may not be enough or may not be swift enough to preserve your life. In a situation like that, either you are responsible for your fate or someone else's. Maybe a bystander, a good Samaritan, maybe friends or family. But the police officers assigned to that particular jurisdiction may not be able to get there in time. So this is the reason why you need a good Samaritan. You need security. You need adjunct personnel, like the security guards that work at clubs, that work at banks, and things of that nature. You need good Samaritans that want to lend a helping hand. But when we have situations like the shootings that occurred and shootings that have occurred in the past, I think that would compel people to have bystander apathy.
Yeah.
And for those that don't know what bystander apathy means, that means someone who witnesses or is in the presence of some sort of crime or maybe and now this is very relative, but an immoral act of some sort. And instead of stepping in, stopping the act, people don't do anything. And that's a serious problem when we have bystander apathy, because when we look at those numbers, we know that there's not enough law enforcement personnel for every citizen of the United States. And that census number includes people who are documented citizens. Doesn't include illegal immigrants. Add a couple million to that number. So if we don't have enough police officers and people are not going to act when they see somebody doing something wrong, somebody being victimized or taken advantage of, where are we as a society?
You know, it's funny that you mentioned that. I think it's not just with people being. I think it's the mentality that people have of stop snitching, I mind my business. You'll see a guy. I'm 36. I'm not an old guy, but I'm not 21 either. You'll see back in the day, you'll see a guy beating the hell out of a woman, and the dudes on the block will stop the guy or beat the hell out of him. Nowadays, you'll have people, and they'll see the same situation, and they'll walk right past it like they don't see it. I think it's a mentality. And then you add on to situations like that where you have shootings where there was a good Samaritan security officer or an off duty officer involved. It's going to always compound public interest. And nowadays, it's even more so because you have a lot of people, especially in the black community, who are so anti-gun. Which I will say this: if you're black and you're anti-gun, you're a damn fool. Like you said earlier, you may have to protect yourself. Like my grandfather's generation was not anti-gun. They had to fight the Klan on the family farm, trying to steal the land.
Absolutely.
So we live in a world of abundance, believe it or not, especially black people in the urban environment. You never had to deal with racism on the level as our ancestors in the deep south. You this is the most racist thing they might get. Well, that white guy got the job before I did. Well, that white guy called me nigga driving past. Compared to somebody burning a cross on your damn land, and this is the 40s and 50s. You and your brothers and sisters had to get the repeater and fire off shots to get these motherfuckers off of it, or they're gonna hang you and your family and rape your mother. So a lot of us live in a world of abundance, believing that the government will always protect us, when it's always the people who protect the government. And there are some good officers out there who do their job to the best of their abilities. Majority are. Yes, you have some assholes who take advantage of their authority and mistreat the citizens of who they're supposed to protect and serve. When you have good Samaritan laws and things of that nature where a citizen can act on behalf of another, you still have to take in consideration, like I said earlier, and you still have to be guided by law enforcement when they get to the scene and be prepared. You know, and a lot of times I say this, most incidents that happen is due to a lack of knowledge and a lack of education. I think that a lot of people have to go to handgun courses and learn how to properly fire, handle, and safely deal with firearms.
And that's an interesting point that you bring up, because I think this is something that we need to actually discuss. And we touched on it yesterday, but we may have some additional viewers today. Um, Actually, I'm going to take down the video that I did yesterday, because today I actually have more facts, and I think that it pretty much, the video I did yesterday is no longer necessary. So, but I do want to ask this, right? And I already know the answer. For those that don't know, I was in the military for 8 years. I'm a firearm owner. I do go to the range regularly. Um, I do have a concealed weapons permit, and I do understand the dynamics and the physics behind the firearm, and uh, and the physiology of the human body and how it responds to stressful situations. But let me ask you this, Charles Faulkner.
Yes, sir.
Now, oftentimes we see Hollywood depictions of interactions between law enforcement and criminals.
Mm-hmm.
And in these actual interactions, in the event that a use of force is necessary, police officers draw their firearms. We oftentimes see there may be a hostage situation. Police officer will shoot the suspect, you know, in the shoulder, or maybe shoot the firearm out of his hand, you know, shoot him in the leg. I mean, let me ask you this, Sir Charles. Have you seen movies like this?
I've seen too much of that bullshit on television.
Okay, we're gonna take it slow today. We're gonna take it slow.
Oh, we gotta take it slow.
So you said you have seen movies like this.
Correct.
Okay, now let me ask you this. Okay. How accurate of a depiction are movies of that ilk?
Probably 5%.
By 5%. Wow, that's pretty disheartening. So, in your estimation, based on your many years of experience in law enforcement, in a situation where you were faced with the suspect that was armed with a firearm, and he appeared to be aggressive, he appeared to have an intent of discharging that firearm at someone, whether it be a police officer or whether it be a civilian. Now, obviously, you want to bring that suspect to justice.
You always want to preserve life, even if it's the life of an asshole.
Now, tell me, in that situation, that suspect is say, we'll say, let me give a good number. We'll say between 7 and 10 yards from you.
Which is about the average shootout.
Yeah, 7 to 10 yards. 7 to 10 yards. That's the range at which I actually, practice my firing. Actually, I do it between 5 and 10 yards. Sometimes it's ability to be more close quarters. But so from a police officer's perspective, you have a suspect between 7 and 10 yards away, and that suspect is waving a firearm erratically. He's definitely presenting a danger not only to the police officers on the scene, but to the general public. You choose to discharge your firearm. Where are you aiming?
Center mass.
Center mass. So you're not going to shoot the gun out of his hand?
Hell no. That's movie bullshit. Movie magic bullshit.
You're not going to wing him in the shoulder?
No, because he can be able to fire back.
So okay, what if you just took out his legs, hit him with a thigh shot?
He can still be able to fire back. The only time you'll see an officer try to shoot anywhere where it's going to be in the head or the hip bone is if the suspect is wearing body armor of some sort.
Ah. Now, let me ask you this. What caliber of firearm would most, I don't know if you guys carry 9mm or 40 caliber. Which one? Or does it vary?
Well, our department carries 40 caliber. That's the little nickname for the 40 caliber is the lawman's caliber. I mean, a lot of jurisdictions carry, I think the FBI went back to 9mm.
Mm-hmm.
They were carrying 40, and then I think they were carrying 357, but they went back to 9mm for their reasons. But we carry 40, which is a pretty good round. It's a variation of the 10mm.
How many grain bullets are the 40 caliber bullets that you guys carry?
Damn, I just looked at the box. I got to look at the box again. Oh man, I'm so mad you asked that because I just had it on my brain the other day. I think that's about one.
I know for sure it's under 180, right?
That's about 180, 160.
Okay.
Because I got the boxes upstairs. I could actually give it to you because I was just answering this shit. You got So you're going to get like about 180, and I believe it goes around anywhere from 980 to 1040 feet per second. Whereas
So
like a
with the
9 millimeter goes around 12 to 1300 feet per second, and 44 goes around 850, 830 to 850.
now when we look at those numbers, when we look at velocity, right? Velocity is definitely a factor, but also is the actual grain weight. That's the reason why I asked them, for those that are listening, I asked them the grain weight because you have a force, an actual impact force, you
Mm-hmm.
know, that's a measurement not only of the velocity, but the actual weight in grains of the projectile,
Because
right?
you need, yeah, because you got to remember when you're shooting 9 mils, that round is going subsonic. So the issue they were having with 9 mils, because it was a smaller bullet, it would go in and sometimes out of a suspect and not doing enough damage to put them down. So you probably had to shoot them more times compared to the reason why they built the 1911, which was built for the 45 in the U.S. military, which was created in 1911, was because they were in the Philippines and they were using like I think the 38 or something, and the bullet wasn't doing enough cavity damage to put them down and out of the fight. And the 45, because it's a bigger round and it's slower, it's gonna hit you harder and do more cavity damage.
And this is the reason why I asked, because oftentimes there's alarm when we hear of stories of officer involved shootings where the suspect was shot multiple times. Like I remember there was a story. I don't know if the guy in New York, Abdullah, whatever his name was. I don't want to butcher his name, but I believe he was an African descent man who was shot like 40 some times.
Mm-hmm.
And and that sounds alarming, but when we talk about the actual physics of firearms, depending on the caliber of the bullet and the number of officers that were actually shooting, could you find justification for shooting someone 40 plus times or
Situation
no?
dictate. Um, it's always the situation. That's
Okay.
why you gotta. That's why it's always got to be investigated. If I shoot somebody and it's just me, and I have to shoot you, what we carry about 14 rounds, public knowledge, and I shoot you 14 times, bam, you're gonna get hit for. You may get hit 14 times. Sometimes you may have what's called sympathetic fire, where you're shooting because the other person shot, and it's just a reaction. So you're
Mm-hmm.
gonna get hit, and sometimes that guy's carrying a gun, and you got what, 3 or 4 officers at the scene, and he's about to shoot. You're gonna get a volley of fire just because you don't want him to hit you or your fellow officers or a civilian. So
Mm-hmm.
you're gonna get multiple shots fired. Now, if it's a situation where, let's say, the guy's already down and there's still fire while he's down, and when I mean down, I mean completely out the fight, like he's not reaching for the weapon, then that would be not justifiable. But if he's still actively trying to go for the weapon, you can still you still can convince deadly force. Just like there are certain things that I always give people trick questions. When is it feasible for an officer to shoot an unarmed person? A lot of people are going to say, well, it's never. Oh, yes, it is. If the person is significantly larger and stronger than you, if you're if you're 5 foot, if you have a female officer, I'm 5'10", anywhere. My weight fluctuates anywhere from 270 to 290. I can go to the gym and I can do 315 for reps. Like I can lift almost 500 pounds. If that 5'3" 130-pound female officer gonna outpower me? No, she's not. Not in any no way in hell.
Well, no, because no, I see it in movies all the time.
It's bullshit.
I see women kick guys' ass all the time. What are you talking about, Charles?
It's called movie magic bullshit.
Charles, Charles, that sounds very sexist.
I'm gonna wear that shit like Superman wears a cape. Then it's called reality.
Oh, okay, okay. Carry on, carry on.
And it's funny that I'm gonna get back to that. It's interesting that you say that because you'll see the movies galvanizing a lot of these gal power trying to fight, and I tell a lot of females, don't try to fight a dude, even if he's your same weight. He's gonna be twice to three times stronger than you, and that's without training. Is she gonna overpower me? No. So if I come over there saying I'm gonna snatch your gun and I'm gonna rape you and stick it up your ass, and I'm still coming in that threatening manner with my fist balled up, and she's giving me a lawful order to stop, and I'm still coming and I'm putting a threat to her and her life and her safety, yes, she can take the shot, unarmed or what. Number
Okay, well,
two,
let me ask
multiple.
you this. Let me ask you this, Sir Charles.
Yes, sir.
Now, in your particular police department, are you armed with a taser in addition to your sidearm?
Well, I don't have a taser. I have a Cocoa Bola nightstick, so
So,
it works.
do you have a nightstick or you have a truncheon?
I have because Baltimore created the modern nightstick, which we call the S-band tune. The one you'll see if you see the wire that's spinning around a nightstick.
Okay.
That's the one that I have. And yes, I can spin it. Got pretty damn good with it too. So if you ever felt Cocoa Bola and Ipe and rosewood, that's a very dense wood. You don't need to hit people multiple times with that one. I struck one guy once. He put the handcuffs on for me.
Well, let me ask you this. What situation would you choose to use the truncheon, or excuse me, nightstick over your firearm?
Sometimes if it's an unarmed person, and let's say it's a fight, or if a guy's trying to fight me, most times if I'm going to a scene, I'm carrying it with me in my hand anyway. I'm usually spinning it. It's at the ready. I'm not threatening anybody. Most of the kids think it's cool because, most kids haven't seen the Yes Man tune spent. We're kind of like when you grew up back in the day, you used to see officers spin their nightsticks all the time. Nobody thought it was threatening. We weren't pussies back then. Um, we usually, when it's like a fight or like a domestic situation, whereas though I could just, even if I have to tap you with it, and just depending on where I tap you, it's going to be uncomfortable. I don't have to kill you with it compared to, using a gun. Now, if I'm going into it where there's a weapon involved or possible weapon, let's say if it was a armed robbery and we have the suspect in a building, obviously I'm going to have my firearm out. So every situation dictates. You're going to hear me say that a lot. Just give me a fair warning. So most times when you go to a common assault, which means there's no weapon involved, they're just using their bare fists, feet, and teeth. I'm gonna 9 times out of 10 have my nightstick.
Okay. So, your particular department doesn't use the actual.
We use the Benagnots, the ones that are collapsible. We'll use those, but I hate those because they're pieces of shit. They're only good for knocking on the doors. So we'll traditionally that was our nightstick, the S-band team, but they gave us some Benagnots because some people can't spend the damn things, they end up hitting themselves in the knee or something. So they have the option of both. They also have the taser for some officers. I don't really care for the taser. I got enough shit. I mean, if they give me one, I gotta take care. I gotta take it. But I prefer my nightstick. One, there's part of the job where intimidation is a very beautiful thing. So when somebody sees you spinning a nightstick, what does that say to your brain? Oh, that motherfucker know how to use that. I better be on my P's and Q's. And sometimes that intimidating factor keeps you out from in the fight, keeps you out of a fight, and keeps you out from shooting people. I think that, in my humble opinion, for a lot of law enforcement officers, I think that a lot of them, especially this new breed and generation, are scared of their own goddamn shadows. I'm one of those people who believe that you should be able to you should be trained in certain martial arts or hand-to-hand combat, both deadly force and less lethal force, less than lethal force. Whereas though there was an incident that I was personally involved with a guy who outweighed me by 30 pounds, and this wasn't even a call. This was on view, something that just happens in your presence or in the surrounding area. And a guy told me there's this guy beating up this woman. He was a big dude. You already know how, if you're from the hood, you've seen it all. When you see a dude in the white beater, fist balled up, his teeth gritting like a goddamn dog, and he's just pissed. He's just angry. And then in the distance, I see the woman, and if you put your fist next to your eyebrow, that's how big the knot he knocked on her head. He hit her. He struck her in the head.
Mm.
So the fight is on. I catch him with a single leg, and he literally, because his legs were so strong, kicked me off of him. So I caught him in a double leg. If you guys are familiar with wrestling or MMA, and took him down. And next thing you know, the fight's on. So he grabbed my service weapon, which is deadly force. That was a deadly, like I could legally kill him at that point.
Mm-hmm.
He grabbed my service weapon. So what happened was I grabbed his wrist, came under his arm. It's commonly called in judo or jujitsu and mixed martial arts the kimura, and I broke his arm. And I like this, and this story is very important to me because it tells you what the hormones and all the chemicals in your body, like adrenaline, can do. And this is the reason why some people may get shot. And this guy was still fighting. So in my opposite, side from my weapon, I have a knife. Some use I carry multiple. Some you see, some you don't. And he was trying to grab for that, so I put him in another Kimura and broke his arm. By the time the incident was finished, I must have hit him so hard in the face where his tooth went through his bottom lip. His eye was shut closed and a cracked orbital bone. He had two broken arms. And it took a while. It took like 10, 15 minutes for him to stop fighting.
Mm.
And a lot of people, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, that's interesting that you bring it up because, in a situation like that, the optics of it will make it seem like it was excessive police force. But when you think about it, that was a situation where that suspect could have very well lost his life. But you exercise restraint, believe it or not, by not shooting him.
Yes, but you could have legally shot him. I mean, the options were open, but it also goes back into training. Like any officer that's on the street, they pass the academy level training. But how many are physically as strong? How many have been trained in different things such as boxing, wrestling, and jujitsu or judo? So that's not going to be every officer you think, because for some reason here in America we think all officers are trained to be ninjas and SEAL Team 6 or Delta Force or some shit, and that's not the truth. Not all officers are trained to that height of extent. As they said in the Army, not all men are created equal. So we have this Hollywood movie, you know, imagination when it comes to police officers, like they could do no wrong, they shouldn't do any wrong or make any mistakes, or they can handle any situation. I mean, things are going to happen where mistakes happen, where you're going to have some very few cops who are just fucked up individuals and should never have been police in the first place. You're going to have incidents where, okay, we kick in the wrong house looking for a bad guy. It happens because guess what? There are people who give us the wrong address. And things of that nature happens, but people get upset, and understandably so. But we live in a world where nobody can be flawed except us
Hmm.
mentality. So when it comes to the police making a mistake, an honest, factual, actual mistake, not doing anything with malice, it was just, hey, I'm sorry. There are times we had guys who fit the description of a robbery suspect, and we get a call, and this guy walking down the street wearing a blue and yellow sweater, black jacket, blue jeans, pair of Tims on, black male, and we pull up on him at gunpoint and we identify him, pat him down for weapons, identify him, the whole 9 yards, and we get the witness or victim to see if that's the guy, and they said that's not him. We apologize. We write him a contact receipt of why we stopped him. If he has any questions, the numbers are on the seat. And sometimes when you actually take the time to not brush people off like they're not worthy, and you give them a couple of minutes, 3 to 5 minutes to explain what happened, 90% of people are going to be okay. Okay, also, I understand. All right, I'm glad y'all doing your job and keeping me safe. Most people are going to understand that. Yes, you're going to get some hotheads. Y'all need to fuck around and get the real criminals. Sir, we were trying to. So I'm not saying it's going to be a perfect everyday situation, but most times, if you take the time to explain to folks, instead of brushing them off like they don't matter, people will understand your job and what your duties are a little bit better.
Well, it would appear just from this conversation that there are a lot of facets to law enforcement. And let's be clear before I go any further. Thank you, Bentley, for that reminder. Um, this live stream is for entertainment purposes only. Charles Faulkner does not speak for every law enforcement officer, and he makes no claims as such. This is for entertainment purposes only. Now, as I was saying, this seems like a multifaceted career choice, a multifaceted occupation with
Yeah.
a lot of responsibilities, a very broad skill set, and a definite prerequisite for a high level of intelligence to operate uh, at a high level. Now, when we think about the actual factors that comprise a quote unquote good police officer, uh, we have to ask ourselves, is this a role or responsibility we want to entrust into just anyone? We want to ask ourselves, again, as you said earlier, who do we want policing our own neighborhoods? Who do we want
Exactly.
keeping us safe? Now, if we have somebody who's in a particular area and doesn't understand the culture, when they actually interact with the populace, there's going to be a disconnect. Certain things, certain behavioral characteristics, certain cultural patterns may be misinterpreted. And again, there's a lot of dynamics, a lot of facets involved with law enforcement. Um, you definitely want to have at least a general knowledge of the demographic of people you're dealing with. So again, when we look at the issues that we consistently have across the nation with regards to law enforcement, it's hard to ascertain whether or not the use of deadly force was justified because very limited information is available to the general public.
Mm-hmm.
So, with that in mind, wouldn't it make sense to encourage people of a minority ethnic affiliation to actually join law enforcement, to be a
That would be
part of law enforcement, to be law enforcement officers?
that would be a beautiful thing. That's
Well, that
the
way, those
that's
people
part of
can ensure that justice is served.
well, yeah.
Why would you entrust such a great responsibility in people who have no investment in you? They don't have a vested interest in your safety or prosperity. And maybe they have no malice, but what if they're just indifferent
Yeah.
and
They
have
can,
no compelling factors to actually go above and beyond the call of duty? Maybe they just want to do just enough.
you're always gonna have that issue when it comes to people. Why do black people need to live typically near each other? Because we understand each other. Why do Jews live near each other? Because they understand each other and their culture. It's no different when working. Now, I'm not saying that a white officer cannot police a black neighborhood. Not saying that. But when you have issues that goes above and beyond, when hold on for a second.
Okay.
One of my buddies knocking on the door. When you have those issues that you know that needs a cultural touch, you're gonna need a guy who you're gonna need a guy or girl who can relate to the ethnicity that you're dealing with. And if you don't have that key ethnic group, and where you need them at certain places, you're gonna have like a distrust. And I'm one of those people who believe wholeheartedly that a lot of major incidents when it comes to police in the last 20 years are dealt because of cultural differences and cultural ignorance.
I I tend to agree. Again, I'm not law enforcement, so my knowledge of law enforcement techniques and literature is very limited, if at all. Um, but I do think that at least a portion of these shootings could have been averted. I think that um, if not unfairly targeted, African Americans are treated with a different disposition when suspected of a crime, or even just generally speaking, with regards to law enforcement. That's just my opinion from what I've seen in my
It's
experience in life.
it's like I
And
said yesterday on your live stream. It's like I said yesterday on your live stream. It, the black man, above any other man, has been demonized historically in the United States. And Hollywood, which is propaganda, and we all know that propaganda is the first tool to war. If I can make you look like a demon and not a human, then people will have no guilt, you know, uh, persecuting you, arresting you, killing you, lynching you, or whatever. Even if you're innocent, we'll just look for a description. It was a black man who looked at me. He tried to rape me, knowing it's a lie. So some innocent black man gets lynched. How many stories
Mhm.
have we heard from our grandparents and great grandparents like that?
Millions.
So historically, the black man has been demonized and looked at as subhuman. We're never looked at as human, which is funny psychologically. We're always looked at as either superhuman or subhuman. There's no in between.
Hmm.
We're either looked at the superhuman athlete. We're never respected for our minds. We're always looked at the superhuman athlete, the mandingo, this sexual beast or this sex craved lunatic. We're never respected as gentlemen and scholars, such as the white man, or great doctors and mathematicians as the Asian man, or business owners and millionaires as the Arab. We're always looked at as the physicality when it comes to manhood. That's why they try to suppress us when it comes to masculine things. The first person they try to shame when it comes to toxic masculinity were black men. So that being said, you're going to have a person who's from, let's say, lily white Iowa, where there's 2% blacks, who probably never been around black people or black, let alone a black neighborhood. And the only time he's seen black people was television. And a lot of television is comedy when it comes to black people. You never see a family unit, or nowadays you damn near see a black man with a white woman or some variation. You don't see the entire black family anymore, or you rarely do. So when they come to meet black people, they think that all of us want to rap, all of us are athletes and play basketball. I suck at basketball. I'm a better wrestler and boxer, way better. And we're not as versatile as every other race of man. So you're going to have some cultural issues of, okay, why do we have brothers on the corners? I never cared to be on the corner myself. Not because I was a lame, no, because, I had better shit to do. But as black people, we're social creatures. We're very social compared to any other race. You and I can just meet on the street and we'll talk for like 15 minutes to an hour and don't even realize the hour passed because we're that social. We love to catch up. We're very family and clan oriented compared to other races of people who are not. So that white officer is not going to see things the same perspective. Be like, oh, I know what he's doing. He ain't selling drugs. He just talking to dude. He ain't seen him in a while. I'm like, what's up? I'm like, what's up, officer? We'll talk about the football game. How about them Ravens or something? There's going to be some type of link to that culture and to that neighborhood and that community that he's going to be ignorant of, even if he has the best intentions. That's why you're probably going to have cultural training for police, which they do, and you're going to have. And I'm also a fan of having citizens do mock ride-alongs, doing actual ride-alongs with police, and also mock academy.
I have an issue with your mic, Charles.
Hold on.
Had a little issue
Uh,
with your mic. It got muffled. Your last
uh,
statement.
I said I'm a fan. I'm a proponent of citizens actually going out and going on ride-alongs with police to understand the career more, and also having like a mock academy where you have to go through the academy and mock incidents where, okay, you got the gun, you got the gun belt, you got the vest, you got the radio, you have the weapon, you're the officer in this scenario. Go, let's see what you would do. Where you could curve a lot of the ignorance on both sides of the field.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And I think one of the barriers to that, of course, is the stigma within the African American community of the police, of law enforcement in general. And there's a natural aversion to law enforcement that has been cultivated uh, from generation to generation. Um, but I do think, with time, it can be resolved. It's something that's going to need constant reinforcement and constant advocacy from individuals like yourself, Charles, who's an exemplary uh, police officer and serves as a beacon of hope nationwide. Um, I do think that this is this is going to be an ongoing and continuous conversation. We will have to revisit this subject. I don't want to keep the stream going too long because I do want it to be palatable for rebroadcast as well. And again, we'll have more conversations on this subject in the future. I do see Head Above Water in the chat. We missed him, but what I think we'll do with Head Above Water, for those that don't know Head Above Water, please subscribe to his channel uh, to catch his live streams. He is based in Asia at the moment. He's in Thailand, and he's been in Asia for a couple of years now. And what I would like to do on a future and separate live stream is that we're going to get his perspective on the dynamics between civilian and law enforcement personnel in Asia. And then we can see if there's any correlation between Asia and the United States. But that again will be reserved for a later date. Splash, definitely. We need to link up on that one. Let me give some shout outs to the chat real quick. Zero Divide in the building. Dave Tao. He's in the building. Frogbox, one of the day one subscribers in the building. Poetic Kales, thank you again for joining me, Poetic Kales. It's always a pleasure to have you. Head Above Water, of course. And Bentley 3805. Thank you again for joining me. And Kachimbari, I think Kachimbari already left. But again, Charles, it has been a pleasure having this chat with you. Look forward to having a chat with you again in the future. And I do look forward to seeing you this Saturday.
Oh yes, it's gonna be hot and cooking on both. And I do agree with Bentley. I believe a lot of the issues we have currently is not just a lack of police respect, is a lack of authority. There's a respect for authority, period, in our neighborhoods, because I hate to go on that rant. We don't have the disciplinarian in the homes like we should, i.e. the father, in a lot of these homes.
Facts. Facts.
And it's been a pleasure, and I'm honored and humbled. You know, next time we gotta. It's been fun already. We're gonna have more next time.
Definitely, definitely. Thank you for having. Thank you for allowing me to have you on my platform, Charles.
It's always a pleasure. Thank you.
All right, and thank you again, everybody, for joining us. Until next time, I'm out.